Hello and welcome to another great, and I promise every week is going to be great, and I deliver every week, another great edition of Beyond the Hype with Black Enterprise. I'm your host, Alfred Edmond Jr., Senior Vice President and Executive Editor at Black Enterprise. And this episode of Beyond the Hype is brought to you by New York Life. Listen, one of the best things about working at Black Enterprise is I get to talk to the people who are most passionate about financial education, wealth creation, for people in general, for the Black community in particular. And today is one of those shows where I get to have that treat, and you get to have it too. We're going to be talking about a really important topic because financial planning is not just about just the X's and the O's and the numbers, but there's a real and emotional journey that you go on with regard to what and why you choose to do it. And so our guest is going to talk to us about why planning is the ultimate love letter. And when I first heard her present this idea, I was like, this is a great topic for Beyond the Hype, because often or too often we don't take into account the emotional motivations behind the money decisions that we make. So please, without further ado, welcome to the show, registered rep for New York Life Securities, New York Life agent, Vicky Frazier-Williams. Vicky, thank you for joining us on Beyond the Hype.
Thank you so much for asking me to join you.
Listen, I'm chomping at the bit about this financial love letter for a lot of good reasons. But let's talk our audience through your journey, how you came to your profession, what led you to it, your journey at New York Life, kind of what your daily work is about. Just give us a picture of the life of Vicky Frazier-Williams.
Well, believe it or not, Alfred, this is my third career. I was a newly minted MBA, not really sure what I wanted to do. I'd spent 20 years in television and radio as a journalist and personality, and then education management, building charter schools around the country. And I almost slipped into this, to be perfectly honest with you. And people ask me all the time, like, how do you go from being a TV reporter to financial services? And I said, it's interesting. It's probably more natural than you would think. As a journalist, I believed bringing people into bringing us into their homes. I was able to educate people, frankly, through television, right? And then when I went into education, it was really hands-on and with families and children. And this is a natural extension because financial literacy, I think, is lacking so much in our community. It is, I don't know if it's something that we're afraid of. I believe more so it is something we don't talk about early enough in our lives. And so I see it as an extension of what I've been doing all my life. However, I think this is the most impactful career that I've had because I am actually impacting generations of people, some of whom I have not met and probably never will. So I did kind of slip into this, and I find it to be just awesome, particularly when I educate one person who then goes on to say, I need you to meet my mama, or I need you to meet my family. And I have had interesting, almost family reunion type financial literacy meetings with whole families. And that blesses my heart.
Our journeys are very similar in this way. I've been a journalist, now for 40 years. If I go back to my real calling to the profession in college, but my degree's in art. Like a lot of people who know me well know that, but most people assume, he's journalism all the way. And I didn't study journalism at all in college. But there was something my mother, once told me that I carry with me, even now professionally. She said, everything you ever allow yourself to learn, you will use it before you die. There's no such thing as useless information or useless knowledge or useless experiences. And what I've come to appreciate now at this stage of my career that I think is reflective in your journey is that, you were, a journalist and a media person, and then, you were in education management, but it was all teaching. And like every experience prepared you for the next experience, in ways that you couldn't anticipate. But when you look backwards, it makes total sense. And so I'm always telling, lots of people, including the people I mentor a lot of people, that experience that you think is not you, and you didn't go to school for that, and you didn't prepare for that, and at least take it seriously, because it might be just there to give you something in your toolbox that you're only
Absolutely.
using it for a season, but there's a lifetime purpose that you haven't arrived at yet. And so when I just see that
That's
you're
true.
smiling, we had obviously a pre-call to this interview, the energy you bring to the idea of what you do today, and that doesn't mean you didn't get joy from your previous careers, but
Oh, yeah.
there's a certain purposeful joy that it seems to be like this is what you've been being prepared for all your life, even though you didn't know that at the time.
I actually think you hit the nail on the head. And, you know, as a result of what I have experienced before, I'm able to bring all of that to the table with my clients now. And so it's exciting. And yes, I am passionate about this. And, you know, you've heard me talk about the ultimate love letter. Well, it's because my parents left the ultimate love letter to me and my four siblings when they passed. Look, within 2 years of me entering this profession, both of my parents were gone. And it was not until they left that I fully understood what those two people were doing all their lives, which impacted our lives, right? My favorite scripture, and it's one in which I build my practice on, is Proverbs 13:22. It says, a good man, in this case, I have to put my mama in there too, and woman leaves an inheritance to his children's children. So that says to me, it's not all about us and the right now. It's about those loved ones, those folk we say we love, right? Well, knowing and showing them that you love them is preparing for the time when you won't be here, because that's the time, that's the road that all of us will walk down, right? So when you take the time to think about what happens if I don't come home tonight, who does that impact, and are they going to be able to handle that? Because it's one thing to grieve a family member leaving, a mom, a dad, a loved one. It's a whole different ball game when you can grieve them and not have your mind filled with all of the things left behind to do. And many times that's
Yes.
debt. My parents believed in not having debt, good debt, and there really truly is good debt versus not so good debt, right? They believed in good debt and not mindless spending, let's say, right? They were clear about what they were doing all of my life, and I was blessed to have them for 60 years of my life. So I'm thrilled about that. But it was after they left here that we realized all of what mom and daddy were doing that allowed us to continue to go on. There is so much misinformation, some disinformation, things that people in our community have either closed their ears to or have never been given the privilege of learning about simple things. But if it's not talked about when we're small, then we continue to grow without the benefit of that kind of knowledge. And for me, even as an adult, I realized that my mom and daddy, they had some good, solid financial
Mm,
principles that allowed them to leave here 100% debt free. Now that's a goal I would love to
right.
meet, right? And they set that path for us if we just listen and then follow and do the things that will allow us to
You-
do
you-
that. So their ultimate love letter, and I see it as a mwah, a kiss to
yeah.
us, right? Was that look, you don't have to worry about anything that I did in terms of debt while I was alive. You don't have to worry about that. And you know, I say this, and I always hope and that folk don't take this the wrong way. My mom and dad left me and my four siblings, each of us, a mortgage-free
Mm,
home and or real estate, right? Huge. That's equity. That's money in the bank that they left behind, which meant they were planning all along to not leave us in the hole. And so that is love. That's, you know, boy, was it Forrest Gump is love is what you do, something like that. It's not something we talk about, it's
yes,
what you
yes,
do.
yes. And listen, we're going to do a deeper dive into the example set by your parents and how that informs your work and what you do for your clients.
Yes.
But I really want to dwell a little bit, take a little bit of time to talk about this idea as an act of love. Too often
Yes.
we approach it as of this kind of duty and this chore we want to avoid, Yeah, if I have to, and I don't want to talk about things like what happens when I pass, and I don't want to talk about the fact that maybe I'm spending a little bit too much money. That all sounds like it's such a burden, and it can be emotionally challenging from that standpoint. But when you frame it as an act of love, it does bring up more positive energy that it makes you say, yeah, yeah, I'm willing to do things that are hard for the people I love. I'm willing to be uncomfortable for the people I love. People do that for their loved ones, especially their children, all the time. And it becomes this. I just want you to talk a little bit more about this idea that this is not just a financial conversation. This is your parents' act of love before you even knew that you were being loved in that way. They were loving you with their decisions in ways that you weren't aware of until they passed. So I think it's helpful for people who are earlier in their journey. Maybe they're in their 20s, maybe they're in their 30s, maybe they're new parents, and it's maybe harder to conceive of. Listen, I can save some money. I need to max out of my retirement savings if I can with my employer. I need to put away an emergency fund. I need to begin thinking about investing early, not because, like you said, it's going to benefit me in today in real time, but there's these people that I love that if I plant these seeds today, it'll bloom somewhere down the road, and I'll be happy I did it.
You are right on it. It's easy today for us to think about right now, right? Um, I've heard statements like this is the microwave age, and we want it right now. That's not the way to go, right? It one of the things I think is difficult, is shown to be difficult in our community, is talking about the difficult things. Um, Nobody wants to talk about death. Nobody wants to talk about what happens when I'm no longer here. The fact of the matter is, there will be a day when you won't be here. And so, if you love someone enough to bring them into the world, to spend time with them, mentoring them, uh, teaching them value systems, then part of that value system should be to plan for what is to come. And you cannot do that too early. I was blessed at 20 something to have a great career in television, had a lot of benefits, had the 401ks, had the disabilities, all of that stuff. You want to know something, Alfred? I didn't understand it. And I didn't stop long enough to ask, what does this mean? Retirement at 22, 25? I'm not thinking about that. I can remember a life insurance agent who was a friend he was behind me forever to just sit down, Vicky. Let me look at what you have. Let me explain to you what you have. Because in explaining and understanding it, you can put some strategies into place now and almost forget it. Set it and forget it. And you look up 20, 30 years down the road and you're amazed at how much money you've amassed, right? For you to not only be able to leave something, but for you to be able to live the life that you want. We talk about living our best life. That comes with some sitting down, asking hard questions. It means having a budget, figuring out how much money is coming in and how much is going out. And am I upside down in that? And if I am, then I need to spend some time finding another source of income that's important for me to have all that I want to have. Not only that I want to have, but those connected to me have. Let me tell you something. I have to tell you this. Early on, one of my first clients I went to, I talked to them about life insurance and how important it was to leave a legacy for her son. And her son, who was an adult son, was living with her. And I thought that was kind of off a little bit, but living with her. And she said, I don't really think I need any life insurance. And I said, what about your son? I don't think he needs anything. And she said something, and my little young mind at that time blew my mind. She says, oh, I'll just bury him in the backyard.
Mm, mm,
It struck me so hard. She was in her pre-retirement years herself. And the more I delved into the fact finding around what she was doing, I found that she was spending about $1,000 a month on lottery tickets.
yes, yes.
right. Okay, so there's no foresight in that. There's no thinking about, what happens when I'm not here anymore. Uh, so the time to budget. One of the things I think I find more than anything else is that a lot of us don't know where we are, exactly where we are. So how do we plan for where we're going to be? How much money is coming in? How much is going out? And what am I
Yeah,
saving?
it's like to set the
You know,
GPS. The first thing the GPS needs to know is where are you now. It's like if I can't tell you where you're
that's right.
going to go and how long it's going to take to get there, if you don't input your current location, I got to have your current location. Okay, this is where I want to go.
Yeah,
This is when I want to get there. Now let me plan how I'm going to get there, and obviously the route will change. There'll be detours along the way, but if you don't plan to get there, you probably never will get there. But I want to back up to a couple of things that I've discussed with other people in your profession, and a lot of that
okay.
is so you talk about the woman that says, "I'll just bury him in the backyard," but and you also talk about how previous generations of Black people often weren't even exposed to investment markets, financial markets. I blow my kids' mind when I tell them it wasn't until like 1974 when women could have access to their own credit. Like that's in our
Come on.
lifetimes. I said when your grandmother was a young woman, she didn't have access to credit. Forget about a credit score. And so some of this is cultural. One of the things I talk about on this show regularly, there's a book I wrote the forward to called The Four Financial Languages. I highly recommend it if you haven't read it, by Tara Jackson, one of my
I will.
mentees. I've written the forward to a couple of her books. But this particular book is interesting because she talks about what she calls the four financial languages. And she wrote it for basically husbands and wives who fight over money to have a way to work through those issues. But the thing is, it applied to me when thinking about my own thoughts about what I thought about money when I was young versus what I had to learn along
There
the
you
way.
go.
So she breaks down the four
Yeah.
languages of money into four categories: people either savers, investors, givers, or spenders. Now, while we do all of those things in the course of our life, we have kind of a default personality that's usually rooted in the culture of our families and our upbringing. For me, because I was raised in a working poor household in a working class community, it was all about saving. My mother was like, "Nah, we're gonna know where every penny goes." Your credit wasn't a reality, so debt wasn't a reality for her. Again, she didn't have. It wasn't until later in
Sure.
life that she could even have access to credit. So I came up with a strong, "Nah, you know where every penny is going," and that's great. And
That's
I've
great.
shared this on the show before. But as I became more successful, like you said, early in my career, I'm in my 20s now. I'm at Black Enterprise. Now things are taking off. The family's looking at me and said, "That boy doing good," that kind of thing. And I'm realizing, and I would say, in terms of financial life, I lost 10 years because I didn't understand until my late 30s that you can't save your way to wealth. At some point you have to
Mm,
invest. At some point, spending has to be more about acquiring things and more about putting your money to work. And so it was like overcoming my cultural upbringing. My education brought me to a new level. My career brought me to a level, but my thinking was still as the oldest of four children raised by a divorced single mother in a small town. And so again, I like to have these discussions with professionals like you because so much of your work is about undoing the emotional, cultural thinking that blocks you from making decisions like. And I got to tell you, I was also in my 20s making real money for the first time, and I remember, I'll give credit to this person, a woman named Brooke Stevens, who is both a well-known author of financial books back in the day, in the 80s and 90s, but also a financial advisor. And she sat me then and my first wife. I've been married multiple times. Now, when we were in our 20s, both with great careers. Me at Black Enterprise. My wife at the time worked in the financial services industry as an administrator. And she was like, "You guys got the income part down, but if you don't get this debt under control, if you don't have a budget, and and again, I'll put it on me. I won't put it on the mother of my children." But I was like, I'm only 27. We're not ready
that's right.
to. She was like, "If you're not going to cut up your credit cards, give them to me." Well,
That's right.
you know, and we were like, "No, we got this. We got this." And imagine, Vicky, I work for a financial business, a financial magazine, so I think I know better. And
Yes.
she's working in a major Wall Street firm as an admin. So some of this is, on the one hand, our cultural backgrounds limit us in terms of the choices that we think we will make. On the other hand, it's hard
That's
for us, especially for successful young professionals, to admit that we need help. And so, again, what you're
yes,
doing is so important. I'm really aiming this to the younger people in our audience, people in their 20s,
yeah,
maybe the first 10 years of their adult life, about why no, you need to think about what life is going to look like when you're 60. You need to think about how you want to live when either you don't want to work anymore or you can't. And you don't want to wait until you're
yeah,
55 to start thinking about that. It's putting money away toward retirement. If you started in your 20s, when it costs a lot less, but also, you talk about the power of compound interest. All real wealth is built over time. All real wealth, no matter how you do it, takes time to do. And the less time you have, the harder it is to do. Again, I don't want to tell your story for you, but what you're saying is so important for people who are in their 20s and 30s. And I want to emphasize 20s more than 30s. Just like, don't wait. Don't wait. If
yeah.
I just had the money back I spent in the clubs in my 20s and 30s, if I just had my drink money,
Wow,
you
wow.
know, and so anyway, I just
And
go ahead.
Alfred, even today, if you have the Starbucks money you're spending, right? The money, just that small, it's a small amount, but it's big overall. If you think about how much money you're putting into that little cup of coffee, there is something that was said to me a long time ago. It had to do with, and I agree with this, some of what needs to happen in our community is we need to change the language around money. There's some things that young folk don't understand. Well, old folk don't understand it either way. It's not how much money you make. My mom and dad used to say this all the time. It's not how much money you make, it's how much you
Mm,
keep. And then what you keep, it's what you do with
yes.
it. And there is a cost to waiting. There's a cost to waiting. The younger you are, the least expensive it is for you to do things like, first of all, life insurance. You can get, I tell people all the time, you buy life insurance with two things: your health and your age.
Mm,
Okay? Your age, if you're blessed, is going to keep
yeah.
going, right? And and your health may or may not continue to get better. Most times it goes the
Yes.
opposite direction. So the sooner you do that, the better. I will very quickly do a $1 or $2 million life insurance on a young person. When I have a young person who understands, allows me to pour into them that for at 20 years old, $1 million life insurance policy probably doesn't even cost you
Mm,
$20. Okay, it's the cost of a Starbucks for the week. And now you put something in place that locks in your insurability. When we look at that 10 years down the road, for us at New York Life, that means that I can convert that life insurance policy to a full cash value life insurance policy, looking at you as if you were still 20 years old, right? So you lock in your insurability, you lock in that early, inexpensive amount, and you let it grow. You start investing at 20 years old. I love things where I can leave it and set it and forget it. Now, I'm not saying set and forget investments, right? You need to
yes.
pay attention, even with your life insurance policies, even with your annuities, you need to pay attention. So I'm not saying set it and forget it, but get it while you're young, while you're able to handle those payments.
So
Uh,
what you're really saying is set it and
things
automate it, meaning you're
that
still paying
that's
attention to it, you're
yes,
still engaged with it, yeah, I tell you, there's a reason why there's withholding in your paycheck because the IRS is not going to wait for you to remember to send them. They're like, we're gonna make this automatic, and then once a year we can reconcile to make sure we didn't take too much. But we're gonna make, and as I say, so
yes,
if you pay yourself the way you pay others, the way you pay your
first,
bills, most of our bills are automated. You do that in part for convenience, but in part because that way it gets done. You don't have to remember. You didn't forget to do it. You didn't, and also you get used to living on what has not been automated. And I share this all the
yeah.
time, Vicky, on this show because it's the biggest piece of advice that if I had taken this advice, Vicky, I'm telling you, I was told by this time I was in my early 30s, I think, and I was told by someone, bank your raises. I said, what do you mean? It's like if you've been used to living on 50,000 a year and you get a raise to 60, but you've been good at 50, don't spend it. You go as long as you can Maybe you can't go forever. Pledge 6 months or a year, you're going to still keep your lifestyle at the 50 and let that other 10 go toward your retirement savings. Let that other 10 go to your emergency fund. Let that other 10 go to reducing debt. Let it go to someplace else and don't let your lifestyle catch up. Like immediately after you get the raise, you decide, oh, we're going to buy a new car. We're going to go on vacation. And he said, if you do that regularly, even if you don't do it forever, sooner or later your lifestyle is going to creep up. It's going to happen. But the more you
That's
can
right.
discipline yourself to hold back, then those raises, it goes back to everything you said, compound interest, accumulation value over time, that will pay off later, and your lifestyle is not going to suffer for it. And, and because of
Not
this
at all.
instant
And that's some of
gratification
the
society
best
that we live in, where we
advice.
want it now, 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 now. We talk about our
Yeah,
parents are talking
gotta
about money
spend.
burning a hole in our pockets. Today, we think, what do you mean I can't spend it like in this moment?
Yeah, yeah. That's some of the best advice. And I, again, like you said, I wish I'd
Yes,
taken that. Right? We're on a trajectory to make more money over time. Right? So as we're making more money, if we bank that, if we're already living, like you said, on 50,000 or whatever the amount is, that extra make. I like to say, give your money a
yes,
job. Give your money a job to do some extra money. Look, put it in an investment
yes.
and watch that and watch it grow, right? And I like what you said about automate. You're right. Put it someplace and let it do
Yes,
what it
yes,
do.
yes. So let's get back to this idea
You know,
of this financially loving, financial behaviors. Um, Talk about some of the things at different stages of your life. We're talking about the 20s, and I really want to focus on young people. Like it's never too late, but more importantly, it's never too early. What are some loving
that's true.
financial behaviors that you try to instill in your clients and the people you influence, that's reflective of what your parents did for you and your siblings, that you didn't discover until this stage of your life and your career?
You actually mentioned one of them from the beginning is saving versus spending. You know, are you a saver or a spender? And what's the benefit of being a saver versus that spender, right? And like I said, starting out with determining where you are, right? Your GPS, your financial GPS, it helps you frame that saving versus spending thing, right? Um, you're one or the other, right? The detriment of spending is when you need in an emergency, you don't have that pot of money that can help you through a hard time. Saving, uh, our parents said it all the time. Keep some of whatever it is you have, put it away, right? So the other thing is understanding needs versus wants. Young people truly need to get that understanding, needs versus want. You need shelter, right? You don't need the most expensive house or apartment, right? You need a transportation, right? You need a car. You don't necessarily need a Benz or a Range Rover, right? We have to have some principles about needs versus wants. We want a great car, a beautiful car. At 20 some years old, you don't need a car that's more expensive than the house or apartment you
Yeah,
live in,
yeah, yeah.
right? That's a principle you need to understand. I need versus what I want. Because if we do the right thing early on, right, my needs will be taken care of and I can get to my wants
My
later
CEO,
on.
Earl Butch Graves Jr., the son of our late iconic founder, talks a lot about young women whose the cost of their purse is way more than the money they actually have in it. They're like, oh, they're on
Yes,
Instagram or on TikTok. Look at my purse, and he's like, but if your purse is 3 times the value of the actual cash you carry around in it, that's the difference between your wants and your needs. I mean, so you can apply this in different
absolutely.
ways.
And so getting a good understanding of that early on is important. An emergency
Yes.
fund is important. We don't know when we're going to need some extra money or we need something to just take care of our
Yes,
basic
yes.
needs, right? a general rule is you want 3 to 6 times your salary in an emergency fund that you do not touch. It needs to be liquid. You need to be able to reach it to get to it, right? But you need to have the principle, or the word I'm trying to say, the discipline. You need to have the discipline to put that money away and not touch it. And God forbid an emergency happens, you're
But
ready
Vicky,
for
here's
that,
another area
right?
where reframing this idea helped me in my journey. And I'm 64 now, so I've been through every all of this stuff. I tell
I
you,
hear
when I
you.
talk to you, I'm talking about mistakes I've made that I'm trying to help you not make. But this one I did pay attention to. A person said, yes, it's an emergency fund for all the reasons you already laid out. But he said, when you're talking about the capacity to build wealth, think of it also as a freedom fund career wise, talking about if you decide that where you're working or what you're doing is not for you anymore, it's not good for your health, it's not good for whatever, it's the
Ooh,
freedom to know for 6 months I can make it until I find my new space, as opposed to I got to take the next job I get. I got to take. And it was interesting. I've been at Black Enterprise again. I'm in 37 years now, so I've covered the people at the highest levels of corporate America. And Vicky, if I can tell you how many
okay.
times there would be let's say your typical white male executive and a black female executive who are at the same level in corporate America, senior vice president, division heads, and how often you would read the white gentleman would say, you know what, I'm resigning my position, and they would say, what are you going to do for the next year? I'm going to work for this nonprofit unpaid, or I'm going to sail around they were talking about the things that they were going to do to get to before they actually found their next job, because they were going to get the job they really wanted, not the job they had to take. And how many times, when we at Black Enterprise cover black executives, it would be like, I got to find my next gig now. Like, even though they were making the same. And so again, one is like, think of the emergency fund as a freedom fund that gives you the freedom to work and have time to make decisions about your career path. But the big one for me, this goes back to going from thinking as a spender to thinking as an investor. It was like, suppose you thought about it as an opportunity fund. How many times does an
Mm,
opportunity come by and we say, man, I'd buy that stock
I
if
wish.
or I'd invest in that company and the reason why you can't do it is because you don't have a pot of emergency money sitting aside that will allow you
Right.
to put that money, not all of it, I mean, but say, oh, I can afford to put $10,000 toward this business idea that might make me 10 times, you know what I'm saying? So it's about the
Yes.
opportunity and once I started thinking about it as an opportunity fund or a freedom fund and not an emergency fund, suddenly it didn't seem like a bad thing. It didn't seem like because again, we think of emergencies, we don't want to think about emergencies because we don't want to think about bad things happening. So this idea of reframing that's why I love this idea of the financial love letter, because it takes it from being this thing I got to avoid to this thing that I want to do.
I I love it, and I love the fact that you love my
I
ultimate
do.
love
I
letter.
do.
That's what
Yes.
it is. It's showing love by showing you, what we need to be about, what we need to do to have that security. And I love what you just said about opportunity and
Yes.
freedom fund. I often will start with young people and ask them this simple question: do you want to be rich or do you want to be wealthy?
Mm,
And do you understand the
yes.
difference? Um, some of them get to it. They understand that rich can be
Yes.
fleeting. You're right. It's not as secure as wealth, and wealth has more to do with your net worth. Remember, I said a minute ago about we need to change the language of money. It's not so much how much money you make; it's how much you keep. But also, it's not what your income is; it's what your net worth is. It's what you own versus what you
Yes.
rent, right? That's key. We don't understand. I will ask people now, what is your net worth? And they have no idea what I'm
Oh, that
talking
whole
about.
thing changed for me when I finally got that. Again, when somebody sat me down and was like, "Yeah, you got a salary. Your wife has a salary. Is great, but when you take your assets and your liabilities, what's left? And
Right,
that's your
exactly.
net
It's a
worth, and
simple
that's real
equation.
wealth. And we live in a society that teaches us that income is wealth, when income is only part of the equation.
Only part of the equation. So that net worth is what we want to focus in on. If we can get young people to understand that early on, it's about owning something. So I've talked to you about the budget. We've got to know where we are. We got to know how much is coming in, how much is going out. That's done by a budget, right? People like to say, "Oh, I know how much I have. I got it in my head. I'll stop a client in a heartbeat." And says, "No, so you don't probably know, right? Because there's a little bit I'm spending here and there. It's coming out in ways that you don't even think about." So following a written budget to know what's coming in, what's going out, and how I might need to push this up to a different level monetarily. So that's important. We need an emergency fund. We're going to call that emergency fund a freedom fund, right? It allows us to make some decisions that we might not be able to make because the money wasn't there. I'll give you a quick off story. When I left TV after 20 years, I went in that day not expecting to quit, actually. I left television, right? When I was growing in this business early on, I always said, I'll do this for 20 years and then do something else. How about in the 20th year, some stuff happened that I did not like, and I said, I'm out. The only person I called was my husband because I knew it would change our lifestyle for me to just leave. But I was clear that that's what I wanted to do, that's what I needed to do. I did not take a moment to worry about what my next step was based on money. So I left. And praise God, within a month, I was on another job. But my plan was to sit out for six months, right? I could only do that because there was a pot of money that allowed me the freedom to take the opportunity to do what I felt at that point was best for me and my mental health,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So that's freedom.
Yes.
That's
That feeds
freedom.
into your mental
Yeah.
health, that feeds into physical health, this feeds into your ability to function cognitively effectively. I mean, this is something I'm big into, this thing called longevity finance. Um, I'm on this, if people know me, know I'm really big into fitness. Oh, by the way, highly recommend this book called Outlive, the Science and Art of Longevity. If you haven't read it yet, I just finished it. Great book.
Oh, you give me a
Oh,
couple of good books to
we could
read.
talk. I love books, and I'm always recommending them. But this whole idea of,
Me too.
and I don't want to go too deep on this because I want to get back to something else you said. But now I'm at a
Okay.
stage in my life where maybe my mother's generation would think, I just kind of got to get a plan, and if I can get to 75 or 80, I'm good, right? If I can get, just plan out the last 10 years of the run. But now I'm like, I may have to do this for another 20, 30, 40 years. How am I going to finance that? How am I going to think about that? And it goes back to your thing about planning. The planning doesn't stop. And now, for good reasons in many ways, because we are living longer, but that can be a bad thing if we don't have the money to live on. So it's. But the thing I wanted to refer back to, you talking about the difference between rich and wealth. Again, something else that my boss and CEO at Black Enterprise, Earl Bush Graves Jr., said he discovered when he went off to college. And he came, again, he's a Graves. He came from a very well-to-do family.
Right.
He said he didn't
Right.
realize when he got to Yale, he did undergrad at Yale, and he was like, well, there's levels to this wealth thing. And he said this
Ah,
at a company retreat. Now, God, 25 years ago, it still sticks with me. He said, I learned that real wealth is multi generational. It goes back to what your parents did for you. That if it's not multi generational, it is not wealth. He says, I found
right.
out when I started meeting my peers, my classmates at Yale, that they had enough wealth for it to cool for a generation. Like they had money that nobody was going to touch until they had children. So he says real wealth is when you have money that's just sitting there cooling for a future generation, which dovetails right back to your favorite scripture about leaving an inheritance for children's children's children. If it's not multi-generational, it is in fact not wealth, no matter how well you're living. Rich is current life. Rich is, yes, I can have a 3-car garage and a Benz here and a vacation home and my kids all go to private school. Yes, that's nothing wrong with that if you can achieve it. But it's not wealth if
Right.
the next generation is starting from scratch. And we see that in too
That's
many
right.
communities where there's a certain amount of wealth built in one generation, and the next generation starts out in debt or in the hole because of lack of planning.
Yeah. And one of my favorite people on this earth, her name is Dr. Pamela Jolly. She is a wealth strategist. And she says it takes 3 generations in our community. It takes 3 generations to build wealth and 1 generation to
Yes.
lose it. Okay. So mom, dad's working there doing what they need to do and leave you, as our parents did, uh, wealth with real estate. And then we don't do the right financial things that we need to do, and we lose
Mm.
it in a generation, right? Shame on us. Shame on us. Um, so yeah, that statistic kind of blew
Yeah,
my
yeah.
mind, right?
But see,
Um,
that leads to the point
it can,
of something that is a big part of why we do what we do. Whether it's you and your profession, me as a journalist at Black Enterprise, even what Black Enterprise is about. And it goes back to there's the financial part, which is the technical part, and then there's the education. And I want to change education to values and principles and
mm,
wisdom. So if you pass on the wealth, but no, you don't pass on the wisdom with it, then whatever wealth you
ooh,
passed on will be lost because it's not enough to say, look, I
ooh,
left you, you're set up, you don't have to work, you're good. But if you don't know what to do with what I've left you, you're right. That's what happens. You lose it. And so a big part of what we're doing here, even now with this conversation, with what you do client by client, family by family, what I do as a still media person, putting out content for
yeah,
for larger audiences, is to say we're
yes,
not just trying to pass on this is what your credit score is and this is how you what a net worth. Like we can give you all the technical definitions. We now have a couple of generations of
right.
African Americans that have that education, but the outcomes won't change if the wisdom and the values don't change.
Oh, that is so on point, right? We have a lot of folk who are, I didn't have this when I was growing up, so they want to give their children everything, not instill in them not just the value, but the wisdom and the experience of work and getting it for themselves. So we give them everything, but not tying it to an understanding of why this is important to do, right? Where, like you said, without the wisdom, really, people perish. And our people will perish if we don't do exactly as you're doing in your forum and as I'm doing in my smaller forum, to reach our people to say, stop, stop, pay attention, listen, let's do this, let's put this together for generations to come.
Yeah, and your work is so
So
important to
giving
us
them
at Black
everything is not it.
Enterprise, and I say this to practically every financial professional I get to interview, whether on this show, I host another show for Black Enterprise as well. That's more specifically a personal finance show. But when Black Enterprise was founded in 1970, and even when I came in 1987, there was either no black professionals in the financial services industry or very few. By the time I came to Black Enterprise, you had that first generation of people entering the industry. And
Oh, 87.
our big campaign, and I would say our founder, Earl Gray's big campaign was we have to support the people in this industry because they are the ones that are going to have to carry this message to our communities that they're not ready to hear yet. If I could tell you how many times, Vicky, just again, we're talking, 30 years ago, when I would talk to a black financial advisor and they say, you know, I got all these clients, and their clients weren't all black, so they're like, I got all these clients, but the ones that I want to listen to me are the ones that I can't get to. I talk to the people in my church, right? People in my community, and they just don't want to hear this conversation that I'm regularly having with my non-black clients who think of this. So again, it's culture change. But it's a dream come true. I'll speak for our late founder to even for me to have a conversation with professionals at New York Life like yourself who are doing this work. But now it's a real legit. There are people who are in this profession because they saw a Vicky and said, you know what, I could be doing that. I could be helping people with this conversation. So what came
That's
to my
true.
mind about this is like You're like, I reach a bigger forum. Yeah, I do. But we like to think ourselves as air support for you guys who are the ground
Oh,
troops who are doing the real work of having these conversations. Like you said, you may only talk to one client, but that could be a generational changing conversation as that person influences their peers, their children, their children's children. And you only need one child in every generation to carry this forward. You want more,
that's
but
right.
you only need one.
It's
Yeah.
That's it's true. It's true, and you've got to impact. Like they say, blossom where you are planted, or bloom where you're planted. You talk to one person, and that moves to the next person and to the next. I've had clients sit in my office and cry. I mean, cry because they were either in a financial tool that they didn't understand, and they actually had wasted years in a financial vehicle that was not paying off for them. So they're either in the wrong thing or they're not in anything at all, right? And I mean, from honestly, from the vice president of the university system down to, a teacher, I've had them crying in my office because they had let a lot of time pass without spending the time to understand the financial impact of some decisions they made. So, to your point about more and more of us being in the field, it's tough. It is really tough because before I sell anybody anything, and I don't consider myself a salesperson at all. I still am an educator. I still am about teaching you what it is you should do, right? And I'm going to recommend some stuff, but I'm not selling you anything. But before I sell one thing to someone who frankly looks like me, there's an educational process going on. And many times I find I have to go really deep to undo, we talk about cultural stuff, right? To undo some of the thinking that has been placed in some of our people. But it's worth that to me. The biggest part of my business, believe it or not, is something we call employee whole life. And it is me going into companies and working with people, employees, who many times the first thing they tell me is, I'm all set. I'm good. I got him on the job, right? And now, the longer I'm in this business, I think the bolder I get. I've told some folk, look, some women, look at me as your big sister. Now, I'm your sister now, right? I'm auntie, right? Let me help you understand why we need to do this or do that, or why that particular thing you did was not the best thing that you could have done. So you say you're all set, and when I start looking at what happens when this job that you're all set on goes away, right? A lot of what we do is it's on the job, right? And so I'm able to come in and say, no, 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 sweetie, we need to come outside of the job, right? Because whether they ask you to leave or you decide to leave,
Yes.
you need to have a plan in place, right? When that happens. And that freedom fund, that opportunity fund, your plans outside of that job is what's important. I have people all the time, other folks saying, that seems like a lot of work what you're doing. I said, but you know what? That will always be a part of my business because these are folk who are doing what they
Yes.
think is right, right? Getting what's on the job. But guess what? What they're doing on the job has more to do with what that company wants to do or needs for their or its benefit, not necessarily for yours. So it's a big task, but I love what I'm doing now. I love what I'm doing, and I can't love it more than if I had people who were willing to listen. Because if you listen, we can make changes that is
In
historic
many
in our
ways,
community.
we talk about the love letter that your parents wrote to you and your siblings,
Yeah,
and your passion for passing it on. And this is another important part of just making progress for African Americans in particular, is that the passing it on, whatever it is, can't just be with our quote unquote children proper. I'm big into mentorship
it's true.
because there's influence I need to have that goes beyond my children, that goes beyond my grandchild. Like
Absolutely.
I have a new grandson. Well, he's not new anymore. He's almost 3, but he's new to me. But but this understanding that passing on to your children's children is broader than your particular formal family that you're, and so in a real way, you're taking the love that your parents gave to you, this love letter that they wrote for you because of the way they managed their resources for you and your siblings. And now that not only benefits the the technical progeny that might come from your generation, but the many
Right.
families and children and their children's children who are benefiting from the love that you are now spreading. Because again, the beautiful thing about love is that when you give it away, it doesn't mean you have less of it. When you share information, I tell
Yeah,
people all the time that the miracle, the fish and the loaves, was people's willingness to share it. Because if they,
that's
the only
right.
reason they found out that it could go all the way around was like, oh, okay, it didn't look like it was a lot, but giving it away doesn't make you less knowledgeable. And so
Not
I
at
want to
all.
bring home that whole point of this. Can you need to do a book or something about this whole love letter, because if you think of it as an act of love, then that love is not just from you and your son or daughter, or you and your wife, or you and your grandchild. It becomes an act of love. I mean, it's for what my career has been about. That this is a act of love to all of the people who will hear this interview, and all these people who will look at this
Yes.
interview and say, "Yeah, I'm going to have a conversation with my husband about what I heard on Beyond the Hype," or
There
I'm
you go.
going to, I'm going to talk to my child about maybe a career in the financial services industry might be something they want to do. And
Absolutely.
that in that way, this financial love letter, or this ultimate love letter, is it
Lives
goes
on.
far beyond what we may be doing in the present moment in our own lifetimes.
Yes. Yes. You know what? I love how you describe my own love letter because it is, and I feel it. I want to share this one thing with you. And I told you I'd talk a lot. But one of the homes that my parents left, my oldest sister, right, who left it, and she has passed now, she's left it to her son, and her son is living in that house with his child, right? So three generations, right? And he completely understands that it's not just about me, it's about our whole family. And our family is not just the Frasers, it is a whole
Yes,
community of African
yes, yes,
Americans.
yes, yes, yes. Listen, now we both know we could talk forever. So both,
Yes,
now we
I love
and
it.
you're not just my guest on my show. You're my friend. So it's fun.
Thank you.
But
I love it.
I want to transition a little bit with every show. We already talked a little bit about health as wealth, and but what does Vicky do to pour into Vicky to make sure that Vicky's good? As I tell my kids sometimes, like if I break down, it all breaks down. So I got to take care of me.
That's true.
And I
That's true.
consider, I literally, I take health as wealth very seriously. We do a health as wealth series of events for Black Enterprise that we started doing last year that I'm responsible for helping to plan. But it's an actual manifestation of what I'm trying to accomplish in my own life, in part because I got on this journey in my 30s when I was like, I need to live longer, again, to buy more time to make up for what I didn't do in my 20s and 30s. That was my
Oh.
big, that's the topic for me. It's an economic motivation to try to eat healthy
Mm,
and work out. And yeah, I get other, superficial benefits, but the other thing
sure.
is, how long can I have a productive, healthy life to recapture whatever wealth that I gave up because of the choices that I'd made or didn't make earlier in my life. So I'm just big in this idea of self care and health is not just a side dish of wealth creation, but a main
Ooh,
dish of wealth creation. Before I finally shut up, I literally do statistical analysis on the amount of wealth that's lost because black men die prematurely. We still have the shortest lifespans, and black women live but often aren't healthy enough to maximize their earning capacity. So one of the statistics I use
mm,
is if a black man making 40,000 a year, which in a major city is not a lot of money at all, dies 25
right,
years
right.
prematurely, he's literally left $1 million of earning power on the table. So
I'd love to see
I do all that framework to ask you, what do you do for Vicky? What do you do to care for and to make sure Vicky's operating at her best self? Mentally, emotionally. What do you do for you?
Well, first of all, I'm a spiritual person, not religious, spiritual. I understand who and whose I am, and I spend time in scripture. I happen to be the superintendent of our Sunday school, which is a legacy thing. My father was the first superintendent of our church Sunday school, and I now am following him in that. I mentor young ladies, have done that from the time I was in television, and I now am a mentor at New York Life. Of young agents coming in, that gives me life and it extends the knowledge and the wisdom that I have. And I've been blessed to be married now for 32 years to a man who is very health conscious. I believe that I have reached, and I won't say the ripe old age, but I have reached what I've reached because of God, of course, but because He helps me focus on eating right, eating healthy. I mean, he's gone vegan. I tell him I can't go there with him, but I am eating healthier than I ever did. When I was reporting, man, it was nothing for me to drive through and eat fast food. And, because we were on the run, we had to get the story. Now I understand that what I put in my body is what will either keep me going or ultimately not allow me to keep going as I'm going now. So I got to get back on the exercise thing. But women, we are probably the worst at taking our own medicine in terms of self care.
And particularly
So
in the Black community, Black women tend to spend all of their energy and focus caring for
on
others,
everybody else.
on everybody else, and putting
Yes.
themselves
Yeah.
last if they're on the list at all. And it seems very wonderful in the present tense, but the price to be paying in the long run for
Yeah.
that is
It's it's
high.
it's hot.
For me, you talk about the lifestyle I lived in my 20s and 30s. I literally just did a big post about this over the weekend
Hmm.
about telling people, we used to take pride. At least I know I did especially in journalism and the Black enterprise,
Of
about
course.
how little sleep we needed.
Yeah.
How we could,
It's
oh yeah, yeah.
so
Well, I
true.
was up till 2 in the morning. I'm back at work at 7,
I'm good.
and I'm good. And now, the book I recommended earlier, one of the things it talks about is that you're really not doing well. I posted this on social media over the weekend. Probably the most important thing that I learned to do over the last 20 years is to insist that I got to get at least 7 hours of sleep,
Woo!
like real sleep, 6 to 8, somewhere in there, but at least don't go below 6. 6 to 8 is the idea. There's science that says if you do more than that, it becomes not good for you either. But this idea that, the team no sleep, you see that hashtag on social. I was like, nah, quit team no sleep because the mental health implications, the cognitive health implications, every other, there's talk about heart attack risk, all could be tracked to not getting enough sleep.
Right.
And I just realized, like, we used to take pride in, I don't need to sleep.
You
I don't
and
need.
I
And now I'm like, nah, I'm getting my sleep. I don't know what else I'm getting, but I'm getting my sleep.
You and I are, you talk about now we're friends. We really are. We are
Yeah.
kindred souls better than either of us probably knew when we started this. But when you talk about seven, I'm wearing this thing now. It's because I make sure I get 7 hours of sleep.
Yes.
And I've lately, and the good thing about what I do is I have the freedom to work when I need to work
Yes.
for the benefit of my clients. But I'll tell you, I might have a really tough case or a bunch of cases that I'm dealing with. And honestly, in the middle of the day, I will take a nap. I would. Somebody told me the other day, says, every time I talk to you, you say you just woke up. I said, because I got to get mine. I got to get mine, right? I can't be sharp for you if I don't take some for myself. And so, yes, I will sleep. And you know what? God has blessed me so much. My sister, when I lay my head on the pillow, that's all she wrote. I'm done. And I sleep well. And part of
Yeah.
that is because of what I know I do for my clients. I
Yes.
treat your money as if it's my money. I'm not going to do anything reckless. We're going to make sure you understand what I'm doing and you're on the same page with me. And so when I go to
Yes.
sleep at night, I sleep well. But I get
Well, yeah,
it
because
in.
it's not just about sleeping long. It is about, again, this is the science.
That's
This
right.
is not about just sleeping long. You can sleep your 7 hours, but if it's anxiety filled and restless, and
It's not
then the
sleeping.
benefits, the scientific benefits of sleep are lost to you.
So true.
And so you're right. And again, it goes back to, again, this idea of these making choices as an act of love
Yeah.
to others as well as yourself.
Yes.
When you
Got
when
it.
you can lay your head on the pillow and know, everything didn't go right today. I made some mistakes today. But I'm at
I'm
peace
okay.
and I can go to sleep and wake up tomorrow and not only be ready to face the day, but to know that I am physically and emotionally prepared
Prepared.
to face
Yes.
the day.
Yes. Yes.
And again, I've been on this journey long enough to realize, remember when it was a time when didn't even want to get out from under the covers.
I
You know,
know.
and I said, you're doing what your purpose to
Meant to.
do, and I feel that with you. When you know it's going to be a tough day, but you still can't wait to wake up. Like
Absolutely.
you're ready to go. You're
Yep.
rested, and you're ready to
You're
go.
ready
And
to
that's
go.
so important because if you have all these other things that we talk about, you have all the wealth, you have all the everything that we all strive for, in terms of our definition of wealth. But if you can't enjoy it, if you're miserable,
That's right.
let's say you're alive, but you're
Yeah.
miserable,
That's not
you know,
living. That's
what's the
not
point? Yeah,
living.
yeah.
Yes.
And that's, during the pandemic, I made the transition during the shutdown, and I had to ask, I went through several life transitions, both into the pandemic and during the pandemic.
Mm.
It was, are you living to work? Or are you working to live?
Ooh, that's awesome.
And we come from a generation where it was work, 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 work,
And
and we kept saying someday in the future I'm going to do.
someday
And
needs
I
to
was like,
be
we are
today.
taking tomorrow's not promised. We're taking things for granted. But you don't get to work to live if you don't put your money to work for
That's
you.
right.
And I guess that's the bow I want to tie around this conversation.
Ooh,
If you're only thinking about working for money, but you're not thinking about money working for you, whether it's as insurance, investing, savings, however you define it, then you can be, one of the people I interviewed, it was a financial service professional last year, talked about the culture she came from, which was a West Indian culture,
mm,
Caribbean culture. And when she started talking to her family about retirement planning, it, there was a cultural disconnect because they're like, no, we work and then we die. Like even the idea, you're here to work,
that's right.
and when you're done working, you die.
People say
And
that.
this idea that there should be a space between working and living that should be funded through retirement. So she had a whole another cultural
It's true.
re-education, unlearning, so she could reteach.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so important to have people like you in the industry, because while the rules may be the same for everybody, the cultural mindsets that we come to this with have to be addressed before we can start making better decisions.
And Alfred, that's one of the things about New York life that really makes me stay here and know that it's been a remarkable journey. We're very diverse, and there's an understanding within this company that there's some folk I can talk to that somebody else can't. I can go into a community and we have some understanding because I'm from this community. I happen to be a cultural ambassador for New York Life for the South Florida office, and it has been a joy for the last year because we have West Indians. I'm even Bahamian descent. We have Cubans, and we have Haitians, and we have Venezuelans. We have everybody. And it's given us an opportunity to explain and help folk understand there's a business case to be made for diversity, right? If we have people from all walks of life within this industry, it means we can love on people through this business in all walks of life. And we can spread this information in ways that just somebody might not have been able to do. So I respect New York Life for that, for recognizing, because there was a time when, all you saw in this business were older white men, right?
Well,
We
I think that speaks to what I think was a transformation, and I give New York Life credit. But if I talked about the biggest change in the financial services industry from when I started at Black Enterprise, now almost 40 years ago, was back then it was believed the information is the same, the message is the same, and it works the same for, like, the stocks are stocks, bonds are bonds,
Yes.
credit is credit. And yes, you're right. There's one language,
Yes.
but it's about the people, not just the products.
That's
It's
right.
not about the people, not just the tools. And now you have a financial services industry. I would venture to say that 40 years ago, you couldn't make the transition from being a television
Sure.
media professional because it was like, no, you got to be, it was all about the technical knowledge and the technical expertise,
Mm-hmm.
not about your ability to connect
That's
with
right.
and educate and deal with people.
That's
So I said the biggest evolution of the financial service industry to me, that I think is the most impactful, not just for Black people, for all Americans,
people.
is that the recognition that this is a people business as well as a financial business, and
Absolutely.
that your ability, that just because you have the right message doesn't make you the right messenger.
That's right. There you go. That's on it.
Which I learned the hard way as a parent. It was like I could tell my kids something, and they're like, "Nah, nah, dad." And then when their peers will tell them the exact same thing,
And it's
and they're
accepted.
like, "Oh yeah, you know what?" In the financial services industry, recognizing that you got to have a wide, diverse array of messengers to deliver the message, to deliver the information, to deliver the knowledge and the
Right.
tools.
Right.
To me, that's the biggest transformation I've seen, again, as a parent at New York Life, that I've seen over the decades in terms of the transformation of financial services industry, which means the industry is more open to drawing talent from other professions
No
who have
question.
those skill sets.
No question. If you had asked me 10, 20 years ago, would I be doing anything in financial services, I would have told you you're out of your mind. I'm a communicator. I'm a words person. I like talking to people. I like interactions and explaining and all that stuff. Well, it fits very well with this industry because the fact of the matter is, long before I can talk to you about your business, you've gotta buy me. You've got to
Yes.
believe that and let me put this out there, a life insurance person, an agent. The first and most important thing is trust. You got to build a relationship with that person, with that client, and that client with you. Because just like you don't go into a doctor and say, "Hey, something hurts," but I'm not going to tell you where it hurts. When you start to deal with one of us, we've got to delve deep, and you've
Yes.
got to open up. You've got to tell us where the issues are so that we can help you decide and determine how to handle that issue, what the diagnosis is. That's almost
Yes.
impossible if you don't trust me going in. So that
One of my
is so
friends
it's
who's in
the
your
you said
profession says that
message.
one of your friends that's one of my friends that's in your profession says to me, my clients have to be willing to be financially naked.
Ooh, I like
The
that.
same way when you go to the doctor and he says, "Okay, take off of your
Take off your
clothes so I
clothes.
can examine what's going on with you."
Hmm.
If you say, "Nah, bro, I don't know what else is going to happen here, but I'm taking off my," that's not your doctor.
That's right.
But if you don't ultimately trust them, you're never going to tell the truth. And if they don't tell the truth about what's going on with them, you can't treat them
Yes,
appropriately.
that's right. That's right. So I like I said, I love what I'm doing. And I know we're way over, but I
I know
do
we're
want
going.
to make sure I
My
let
producer's
you
going to
know
be like, "When are y'all going to stop?"
we're way over, aren't we?
So we're going to wrap. I'm going to let you make this statement. We're going to wrap
Yeah,
up.
but and I like to tell people this, that my dad was a hardworking mechanic, and my
Mhm.
mother was a stay-at-home wife and mother. Uh, they didn't have a college degree between them,
Mhm.
but they had love for their children that they brought into this world. They had love for each other. My father wanted my mother to stay home so that when we got home from school, there was somebody there. We were wealthy and rich in a whole different way. We had, the roof over our head and the food on the table. We had mom and dad in the house. So there was love throughout. And what I understood before they left here was, his work outside the home and her work inside the home came together in the most powerful way parents could give to their kids. And so their ultimate love letter was not just the love they gave us, but the life insurance, the long term care, the annuities, the things that left us able to not worry about bills, not worry about debt that was left. And we handled everything they would have wanted us to handle. And we know that they're proud of us.
That's the perfect way for us to wrap a bow around this. Before I let you go, what's the best way for our audience to learn more about you, follow you, whether it's on social media or whatever?
Yeah,
What's
well,
the
I'm
best
on
way?
social media. I'm on
Okay, great.
Facebook. I'm on LinkedIn. You can get me that way. And, you can
Is it
always get
Vicky
to
Fraser
Alfred.
Williams wherever you are?
Pardon me?
Is it Vicky Fraser Williams that
Yeah,
you'll
in most
find?
cases, it's just Vicky Fraser Williams. You can find me.
Okay,
Hey,
wonderful.
somebody said one time, you can Google me. I'm there. You'll see me.
All right, I love that. Listen, Vicky, it's an understatement to say this was a pleasure. Thank you so much for being my guest
Thank you.
on Beyond the Hype.
I appreciate you.
You see, I promise and I deliver every time. This has been another great edition of Beyond the Hype. This episode of Beyond the Hype is brought to you by New York Life. I'm Alfred Jr., Senior VP Executive Editor for Black Enterprise. Thanks for joining us. Take care, and we'll see you next time.